The words of the preacher, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit is a man from all his labour, in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes towards the south, and turns around to the north, and the whirlwinds about continually, and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. All things are full of labour. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under heaven. Is there anything of which it may be said, "See, this is new"? It has already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who come after. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men, by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed it is vanity and grasping for the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. I communed with my heart, saying, "Look, I have attained greatness, and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. I set my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is a grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow." Well, for these moments, it's just one word I would want to bring to your attention, and it's simply one word, is this: futile. I wondered if you've ever had the thought that everything that you've done in life, even the best, even the most important tasks of being perhaps even a parent, a father and a mother, it may dawn upon you at times that what was the point of it all? That thought comes to us as human beings because we live in a world where everything we live for under the sun, as we read here, is vanity and full of emptiness. You may have actually lived a life which is full of achievement. You've done well in job, in business, you've climbed the social ladder, and actually people do think good of you, or may have had great success. If I came to your homes, there may be a medal, a certificate, a cup. You achieved and excelled in many things. And yet, as the older you become, the thought dawns upon you that all that you have done, even achieved, is the word futile. Because we realize that in a few days we'll soon be gone, and everything, whether good or bad, will be forgotten. Now, if you actually do think that, I know something about you. You're not a Christian. You're not a Christian. Because what's happened is this: you've lived your life for all which is horizontal, which is under the sun. You may have lived your life for the things of this world, and then you realize everything passes away. Now, I don't want to be morbid. I definitely don't want to depress you this morning. I actually want to tell you the great good news of the Lord Jesus Christ. There's a little chorus that little children learnt even in this place of worship. There's a life which is worth living. The only life that counts is the life that's lived for Jesus. The only life that counts is a life that's lived for Him. If I live my life for myself, I will only lose it. But if I give my life to Christ, He will take it, fill it, use it, and you will find new life, abundant life. And the wonderful gospel of Jesus Christ is this, is that if you were to live for Him who is above the sun, and to live for God, you would know one filled with meaning. But look, this morning, we're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it begins with these words, vanity of vanities. Meaningless, futile, futility. And we're presented with that one word. Now, what happens in this book, if I just want to tell you, is that this one word is very important because of this, is that the writer has made this work, studied the things of life, and at the end of it, he tells us why. And he has used words that will penetrate into our soul and into our being. And what happens is, he tells us in chapter 12, verse 10, and the preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. Words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. And what happens is the writer of this book, he has something to say to us about our lives. And he says, do you know something? I've picked my words very carefully and very wisely. And this is what I've got to say to you. Vanity of vanities. And it's meaningless. And you know, that can actually speak to us. Because the older we get, we begin to have that thought more often, that what we've done and achieved will soon come to nothing. Now, like I said, I want to this day preach to you the gospel. And actually, the Apostle Peter says the wonderful news that you've been redeemed from your aimless conduct and your corruptible ways, not with silver and gold, but with the precious blood of the Lamb. Think of that. There is now a word which we want to give, but before that, there's a need for us to understand that the life that we live can be so futile, and these words actually speak to us. I'll give you just an example what this great writer is doing. And he actually says, look, I have used these words like a wise scholar driving nails into us, like a shepherd. Let me tell you about the good shepherd. No, the great shepherd, the Lord Jesus Christ. He's the one who came into this world and taught us. He's the one who died for us. He rose again. And there's an account of an appearing of him risen, and appearing to Saul on Damascus Road. And this is what we read here. Now, these are the words now of the shepherd himself. Verse 5. And he said, this is now Saul, "Who are you, Lord?" And the Lord said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads." Now, do you hear that? Just as this writer, he said, look, I've picked these words, and they're like goads to you. A goad was a stick which perhaps a shepherd would use with a point on it, and would just prod perhaps the sheep to get into the path. And now you see the Lord Jesus Christ. What he does is he appears to Saul, and he says to him, why do you kick against the goads? Because in life, there are prods upon our path. There are prickly situations that we can come to. There are those things that we cannot avoid, which which pierce us. And one of these goads is this, the meaningless of life. Now, to the Apostle Paul, it was this. He was fighting against the reality, the truth, the sheer enormity of Jesus Christ, his conscience. Now, that may be you. There are lessons that we need to learn from life itself, and we need to hear it. Those words of life that come to us and tell us of this is the wrong way, this is not right. And so it is then that these words are goads. And I want to bring it to you because of this. Because in the last number of months, there has been a shift in our thinking, perhaps even in your life. Such has been the change in our work, what we've lived for, what we've considered important. Do you know, in a moment, all our lives may have come tumbling down. Look, people have lost jobs, people have built businesses which will never reopen. People have given their lives and now they've seen it come to an end. There are those things that we thought we couldn't live without, and now we find we can live without them quite easily. And they weren't so important, and actually, see, not so important. There wasn't much about them. There has been a learning curve, even in this COVID. There's been like a prod to us as we think about how life can be so transient, and in a moment we could be gone. These are the goads of life. And that's what this writer has done. He has come to show us, and he has come now to use these to point us and prod us into this way that we need to go. And could I just point them out to you? Here's the very first. There it is in verse 2, vanity of vanities. And then verse 3, the profit as a man from all his labour. And here it is in verse 4, one generation passes away and another generation comes. Now here it is in verse 3, in which he toils under the sun. And the first thing of one of these goads in our lives is the very fact of the transient nature of life itself. One generation comes, but we're only here for a short time, and we're soon gone, and we'll soon be forgotten. And what we've lived for and what we've done, when another generation comes, they're different. And what we thought was really important has moved on. We come and go, but the world carries on. Now that thought, it can be exceptionally depressing. Let me give you a little homely example. Many years ago, I was called to a particular house in this town. I had never met this delightful, lovely old lady, really. I think she was 88 or 89 years of age. She called me to do a funeral for her and wanted to discuss with me some of the funeral plan. I never met her before, and as I sat down, she began to tell me her story. She had lived in this town all her life, born and bred. She said about a family who had been upright and good citizens, lived morally, served this community, were actually part of a society and even of a religious, I don't know how to put it, but another religious organization within this town. And what she said was this, but all that's forgotten. Actually, this religious institute had forgotten that she existed. And she said these words, they haven't got a clue. They have no idea what my family did, how they served, how they lived, what they provided, what they've given. He said, in this very place of worship, the very things that they're using were provided for my family. But it's all forgotten, even when she was alive. And it's all moved on. And you may feel that in your life. we are only here for a very brief time, and then we're gone, and everything that we've done will be like forgotten in the wind. That's one of the goads of life. And not only that, you find it here, because as this world goes on, as we're told, the sun rises, it goes down, the wind whirls around from north to south, and then he tells us, as the rivers flow into the sea in verse 7, and the sea is not full, there's something else in verse 8, and it's this: the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Do you know, there's another prod to us in life that is so brief, and in the brevity, we're never fully satisfied. The eye just simply can't get enough. That's what life is like. Well, you know it. I know that you don't want to be super rich. You don't really want to win the lottery, but you just need a little bit more. That's what it's like in life. Women want to be a little bit more perfect. We always want the latest gadget. You know, that song of the Rolling Stones, which has been going around for about 50 years at least. I can't get no satisfaction. And that's what he says. There's something else about life with all its toil, living horizontally for that which is under the sun. There is no fulfillment in life itself. This is the failure of secularism, living life without God, only being then for a short time, knowing that things will soon be past, and also this awful, terrible feeling that then in verse 9, that which has been is what will be. Although everything now is moving, the reality also is this: things do not change. Verse 9, and there is nothing new under heaven. Is there anything of which it may be said, it is new? And you see, that's the third thing of one of those prods of life. And if you were a young person this day, and you have for a moment, can you remember, if you're not young, that crazy ideology that you had? One day you're going to change the world. It was going to be different after you've lived in it. And then it begins to dawn upon you, for all your social justice and inclination, the world is still corrupt and things never change. Whatever government you pick, whether it is blue or red, it always remains the same. That's a terrible feeling. And you know, that's the problem we've got today. It's a great problem for young people. Do you know, when we think of this land in which we live, where people are ending their lives, where they're cutting their lives short, do you know one of the reasons is? Because of the sheer futility and hopelessness and meaninglessness of life, that whatever they do, things cannot change. That's the problem. We've taken God out of the picture. We've forgotten about him. Let me describe it like this. It's not the burdens and the weight and the stress which leads people to drastic measures. It's not the weight of life. It's the weightlessness of life. That is the great burden that a young person has to carry, because they have no thought of God. And here it is. Things always stay the same. Now it may be that you say, well, okay, I understand there's not much perhaps about my little life here in what I'm living. You know, I'm just tired of picking up those Cheerios from the kitchen floor. You know, I'm tired of just doing, the cleaning and all the rest of it. But if I was only that Formula 1 racing driver, if only I was the Premiership's highest scorer, yes, if only I was outside half of Wales, then my life, well, I'd be crowned like a king. No, you need to listen to this. Because this is the writing of someone who was someone. This is the writing of someone who was a king. Here it is, verse 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And what a king he was. He was one of the greatest kings of the ancient world. He's one of the few kings that we remember this day because of his wisdom and because of his wealth and because of his fame. People came to him from all over the known world. The Queen of Sheba, for example. His wisdom spread abroad. It says that in his day, silver and gold were like paving stones upon the streets. Here's someone who knew what it was to be in high office and to live with, yes, the burdens and the decisions and a meaningful life. And yet here's the one who has written this particular account. Don't think for a moment, just because you think if you have a little life which is a little bit higher, then my life would have much more significance. No, this is not now written by someone. You know, sometimes you have that thought, don't you, when you watch one of these programs of rich housewives from California, and you see them there and you say, oh yes, with their 3 cars, with their 5 mansions, with everybody and you say in your heart, but they're not happy. Oh, I wish I wasn't that happy. You know, there it is. You say, oh, look at them, but they're not happy. No, this is not someone with an envious, jealous streak pointing the finger now at those who have everything, fame, fortune, beauty. They're not happy. This is Solomon. Solomon, no one was richer than Solomon. And no one was able to follow his desires of his life as Solomon. It's his words. Now that's important, because when you read this account in the book of Ecclesiastes, and I would want you to read it. If you like biography, you buy the biographies, don't you, of the rich and famous and those who have achieved, of the people that you like. 2 things about those books that you need to understand. The book of someone's life who tells you, oh, what a great life it is, everything's bliss. They're lying. Actually, when you read and open the books, if they're being true, this is what they tell you. It was hard work. It was full of toil. They struggled greatly. And when they finally got to the place they wanted to get, they were filled with anxiety and worry that they'll come from it. And when you read the last chapter of a biography of those living today, read them. And that's what you'll find. It was filled with lots of grief, as he says, and lots of sorrow. At the end of the day, what have we to show for it? This, you see, tells us the very goad of life, of living now under the sun. He tells us what it is like. It is like in verse, here it is. It is again vanity. Could I point to you verse 13? It's not only the futility of secularism, there is the failure of rationalism. Because in verse 13 he says, and I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men, by which they may be exercised. Now what he does, because this is his work, and he was wise, we know that, because he was someone who actually did know God. God appeared to him in his life, and God granted him wisdom. And that gift wasn't taken away from him. Although he went away from God and began to live his life without God, living now just for the things of the day and that which is created, yet he tells us, if you want to know something and learn from life, he says, well, listen, I did a PhD. I did extra research. I searched out I tested, I looked for many things to see why people were working, what they would exercise with. And verse 14, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity, grasping for the wind. Now, I want us to learn a lesson here, because this is what he tells us. It's an important lesson. What is crooked cannot be made straight. Now, you may think in your life that there's an answer out there, under the sun. There's a little piece of wisdom that we haven't found or come to know. And all we need to do is learn. And these universities, the more we know, the better we'll be. You've got to listen to this. There's the futility of secularism, the failure of rationalism. Let me give you a quote. Now, forgive me, but this is my favorite psychologist at the moment. And it's by a man called Paul Wolsovic. Paul Wolsovic. Read anything about him. Top of his field. Died in 2007. So now, after 100 years of psychological learning, here's a man who was at the pinnacle of his profession, rose up through the ranks, studied as much as he could, and this is what he says. Here's why he's my favorite. After many insights of learning, this is what he said. After all rational research, in many cases, listen to this, made people worse. That was his conclusion. Actually, he said, the insights that you can get into your life could actually make you blind. And he famously stated, he could not think of a single case in which someone changed as a result of deepening understanding of self. Note that. Do you see it? Here it is. What is crooked cannot be made straight. I searched, I looked, I had wisdom, I studied, and I know that things are wrong. But after all of it, I can tell you this. That which is crooked can't be made straight. That which is lacking cannot be numbered. You know why? Because it's under the sun. And there is no answer from this world. There is no secret religion that can deal with the human need. There is no hidden wisdom of the ancients that can be discovered, that you be able to have meaning in life. There is no knowledge that you can find in your being that makes sense, that you then could live a straight life and a whole life. Because this Bible tells us the truth. It tells us, and as Solomon said, it's crooked. It cannot be made straight. That's why the gospel comes to us. It's the wonderful news of this. You need that which is from above the sun. There's a birth which comes from above, that a person needs to be born again by the Spirit of God. A person needs God in their life. It's the very gospel why Jesus came and taught. Let me tell you, there was a miracle that Jesus did. And those miracles show us the power and the good news of God in this world. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Now here's the miracle. There was a woman who was bent over for 18 years, crooked, bent over. She was in that position. And Jesus, it says, straightened her. That's the power of Jesus. That's the power of the gospel. That was what was shown to us. There is nothing in this world that can make the crooked straight, but one who came from heaven itself, the Son of Man who came down from heaven, the one who ascended into heaven, the one who died upon that cross of Calvary, that you could be made right with God and you can stand upright before him. That's the gospel. Do you see what Solomon says? Oh, there's the futility. There is, you see, the failure of human rationalism that can deal with our condition. But there's a greater than Solomon, a wiser than Solomon, another king who came from glory. He came. And here he does something. Do you know what he does? He not only makes straight, but he can actually fill that which is lacking. See, in your life, you will never be satisfied unless you know Jesus Christ. That which is lacking cannot be numbered. So there's a testimony that's from this chapel. I'm not going to give the name because it's local. But there was a Sunday school teacher who actually talked to one of the Sunday school children at 17 years of age and just told them the news and said to them, now look, named them and said, you will never be happy until you have Christ in your life. They had everything that was spoken of. Playing cricket for our local town, blessed in one way, a silver spoon perhaps in their mouth. And when he was dying, he remembered those words of the Sunday school teacher. And he said to me these words on his deathbed. That Sunday school teacher was right. I was never happy. You see, you need to know Jesus Christ. But look, verse 16 to close. And just in case it may be that someone is listening and you've actually come to the point where you've done everything that you wanted to. Verse 16, I communed with my heart saying, look, I've attained greatness. I've gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. Look, he did it. That's what I set my heart to do. And that's what happened. I communed in my heart. Although you may not be a Solomon, but you've gained everything that you wanted. You've lived your life. You've got your children. You have your family. You've done your work. And you have it all. And at the end of it all, this is the problem. It was the grasping for the wind, is a way to put it. He chose his words carefully. What's life like? It's like that. You just can't lay hold of it. Look, actually he tells us the truth, and they are words of truth. In much wisdom is great grief, and in increase of knowledge is sorrow. The more he came to know, the more sorrow he had in his life. As a lesson to learn, the failure of rationalism. There was a film, and I've got the right facts now. The film was actually in 1982, I think, or 3, I want to be right. And it was called Educating Rita. Actually, it had a BAFTA award. And actually, the actors were Michael Caine and Shirley Temple. Those were the actors. I don't know if you've seen the film. It's actually a very good film. It's about someone who was a life of a woman who's brought up perhaps on a council estate or brought up in a deprived kind of way, but always wanted to have that learning, that culture, sophistication, to be someone, to know, and to the refinements of what it is, of learning and language, all these kind of things. So she goes to university, and I think it's Oxford University, and Michael Caine is the teacher. But it's a profound film, because it teaches that as she was learning, you see, Michael Caine, he is the professor, but life isn't great. He's a drink problem, he's on the bottle. He knows of the sheer vanity, emptiness of it all. And as she is learning more, thinking this is the way to be, then it dawns on her, at the end of the life, it has nothing to offer. Nothing to offer. I don't want you to watch films, but that's one for you to watch, because that's a true reality. 1983. This was written 3,000 years ago, and it's the same today. And that's why that film was so powerful, because it's like the goad of life, which points us and pricks us and shows us this is not what we're made to live for. Look, do you know, there is much grief. The more you know. In one sense, that saying is right. Ignorance is bliss. Because the more that you do know, the more you've got to worry about. The more that you have, the more you've got to think about. The more that happens in your experience, the more you have of an understanding which can only bring grief to you. And these experts, see, they don't know. The more you know, the less you know. And of course, be mindful of that. In these days when we've got the experts telling us of what we need to do, especially in these difficult times. Because let's be honest, what do they know? When I was brought up, they were telling me butter was bad for you, margarine was good. Well, they changed that, didn't they? And then, you know, they told us, they said, you know, full cream milk is bad for you. But now, you know, it's not too bad these days. It's back on. The scientists, what on earth have they told us? In the last 6 months, it seems to be the scientists in Germany are different to the scientists in this country. And those which are leading are different in Wales to those which are in England. You know why? Because the more people know, the less we come to know. And it causes great grief. Look, I want to close with these words. On the open air, we've been looking at this great truth. What is my only comfort in life and in death? And the reality is this: when you look at life under the sun, it is all meaningless. We need now a comfort, and we need a security, we need a help, we need a wisdom. We need one who's above the sun, and to live for him. That's the Lord Jesus Christ. Look, may God bless this message to you as we come to have one of the prods of life that will lead us in the way that God wants us to live, which is for him, and to his glory.